Welcome back, everyone. Let's jump right in. If you've ever wondered how to map out the exact evolution of a successful digital service business, well, you are in the perfect place. In this explainer, we're going to walk through a complete, step-by-step evolutionary roadmap. We're talking about the entire journey, from being a solo freelancer who's just starting to carve out a niche, all the way up to becoming a highly efficient, value-driven agency owner. We've synthesized some incredible data, research, and expert frameworks to build this blueprint. So let's get started.
Before we even touch the mechanics, we've got to address a really common pain point. Picture this. You spend hours, literally hours, perfecting a service. You put it out there, hit publish, and then nothing. Just crickets. Maybe one spam email if you're lucky. It is incredibly frustrating, right? Well, this quote from VitaMail's copywriting research perfectly hits the nail on the head. Customers don't buy features, they buy better versions of themselves. If you're hearing crickets, it's probably because you're selling a feature, not a transformation. Today, we're going to completely flip that mindset.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for how we're going to climb this evolutionary ladder together today. First, the digital landscape. 2, copy that converts. 3, winning algorithms. 4, scaling up. And 5, we'll wrap with the service dominant shift.
All right, phase 1, the digital landscape. These are the absolute foundations of freelance marketing.
Now, according to the Conquer Guide to Freelance Marketing, every single scalable business starts with a high-value foundational skill. There are 4 core pillars that businesses are just absolutely desperate for right now: search engine optimization, social media marketing, content marketing, and email marketing. And why these 4 specifically? Well, because they allow businesses to grow online organically. No one wants to be constantly draining their budget on ad spend, right? Mastering even just one of these turns you from an easily replaceable worker into a totally invaluable asset. But having the skill is really only step 1.
Which brings us to phase 2, copy that converts. This is all about hooking the client.
So you've got the skills, but how do you actually sell them? You use the data-backed psychology of copywriting, specifically the PAS framework: problem, agitate, solution. It's brilliant in its simplicity. When you're writing a proposal or a landing page, absolutely do not start by talking about yourself. Nobody cares yet. You start with the problem your client is facing. Then you agitate it. You remind them just how frustrating and painful that problem really is. And only then do you swoop in and present your service as the solution. Starting with that kind of deep empathy builds immediate, undeniable credibility.
To put this into perspective, let's look at the sheer power of being specific. In a real A/B test run by VitaMail, the baseline call to action was a super generic sign up. The variation? Start my free 30-day trial. Changing that vague little button to a specific benefit-driven action skyrocketed conversions by a massive 31%. No way, right? It just proves that absolute clarity and taking the risk away from the buyer is quite literally everything.
Now, writing that kind of killer copy takes a lot of time. That's exactly why we use generative AI as a co-pilot. But, and this is a big but, you don't want to sound like a generic robot or some cheesy salesperson calling everything a game changer. To fix that, use the RTFCC framework. You assign the AI a role, give it a specific task, demand a particular format, provide the context of your product, and finally, set strict constraints. Using this structure lets you rapidly crank out and test amazing copy variations that actually sound human.
All right, phase 3, winning algorithms. It's time to talk about mastering platforms like Fiverr.
80 million. Let that number sink in for a second. That is the staggering number of monthly visitors on Fiverr. It represents a massive, almost unbelievable volume of opportunity. But of course, it also means intense competition. To capture even a fraction of those 80 million pairs of eyes, you've got to understand exactly how the platform's algorithm decides who gets seen and who gets buried.
Here's the secret. You absolutely cannot trick the algorithm. Don't even try. But you can feed it exactly what it's hungry for at every single stage of the buyer's journey. It's a very logical funnel. If your goal is more impressions, you've got to use high-volume keywords and pick the right niche categories. Okay, so now you've got impressions. Next, you want clicks. That requires eye-catching thumbnails and highly optimized titles. And finally, to turn those clicks into actual conversions, you need rock-solid offers and exceptional reviews. It's a direct chain reaction.
And out of that whole funnel, the absolute most critical metric is your click-through rate, or CTR. Simply put, it's the percentage of impressions that actually result in a click. CTR is the ultimate test. Why? Well, think about it. If Fiverr shows your gig to 1,000 people, giving you those sweet impressions, and nobody clicks your thumbnail, the algorithm just assumes your service isn't relevant. It will literally cut you off and stop promoting you. Your thumbnail and your title are the ultimate gatekeepers here.
Moving right along to Phase 4. Scaling up. This is the transition from freelancer to full-blown agency.
So, you've mastered platforms and copy, but eventually, you're going to face the monster of burnout. That's why we look at this scaling roadmap from the Enablers Agency Bootcamp. You start out as a solo operator. To break free from doing everything yourself, step 2 is creating standard operating procedures, SOPs, and actually hiring help. Step 3, implementing workflow automation using CRM tools. And the ultimate goal, step 4, is removing founder dependency. By documenting your processes and delegating, you, the founder, are finally totally free to focus on high-level growth instead of being bogged down in the daily grind.
Now, to actually make that massive leap, you need 4 structural pillars. First, outbound sales systems, so you're not just sitting around waiting for inbound platform traffic. Second, CRM automation to keep track of all those leads. Third, quality assurance systems, so your team consistently delivers great results without you having to look over their shoulder. And fourth, this is absolutely crucial, value-based retainers. This whole setup lets your agency step away from selling cheap hourly work, tap into amazing global talent to fulfill the tasks, and keep high-paying clients coming back month after month.
And that brings us to our final phase, number 5, the service-dominant shift. Let's talk about co-creating value.
So the old traditional way of doing business is built on what's called goods-dominant logic. Think of it like a factory. You cram all the value into a product and just hand it over to a passive buyer. The focus is purely on value in exchange. I give you this, you give me money. But the modern approach, which is actually backed by academic research in the Journal of Economics and Administrative Sciences, is called service-dominant logic. This flips the script entirely and focuses on value in use. In this model, modern agencies act more like value facilitators. The product itself, it's really just a vehicle. You aren't just delivering value anymore, you're co-creating it alongside your partners.
Now, in fancy academic terms, this means customers are operant resources. But what does that actually mean for us in plain English? It means your client is not just some passive buyer sitting at the bottom of a sales funnel. They are active participants. Their feedback, their specific interactions, their data, and how they actually use your service in the real world, that is what actually generates the real value. Without their active participation, your service is basically just potential energy.
We have covered a massive journey in this explainer today, haven't we? From mastering your very first digital skill to optimizing how you show up on platforms, all the way to building an agency that thrives on mutual value creation. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. As you